Okay, welcome everyone for a lively panel discussion here. My name is Ashok Ranadive, and I have esteemed panelist with me, Erich Spangenberg, who's CEO of IPwe, Rasikh Morani, CEO of Arcadia, and Barghav Perepa, Principal Blockchain Architect at IBM. We are going to be talking about building enterprise-grade applications on Casper. We have about 30 minutes, and the structure that we have for our discussion today is we'll start with short introductions, and I'm encouraging and inviting my panelists to kind of share one fun fact along with their introduction. Thereafter, I have some directed questions for each of the panelists, and then some open questions we will kind of discuss together. So let me quickly go first, introducing myself. My name is Ashok Ranadive, Director of Professional Services. I joined CasperLabs about 2.5 years back in the early days of the startup. Prior to joining CasperLabs, I've spent 12 years at Google in different locations in India, Singapore, and the Bay Area, primarily managing professional services and large programs. Prior to Google, I was with Indian Navy and retired as a commander after full commission. By education, I'm a postgrad in nuclear engineering, and I also have MBA from Accelara and an executive MBA from Stanford. Over to you, Erich.
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Erich Spangenberg. I'm the CEO of IPwe. IPwe is modernizing the world's patent system. We've been working with Casper for about a couple of years now, and look forward to talking to you this evening. Thank you.
Over to you, Rasikh.
Absolutely. So my name is Rasikh Morani from Arcadia. We're a software development and security company building in the Casper ecosystem. We primarily work in the DeFi space, as well as with the Layer 1 blockchains and in zero-knowledge proof cryptography.
Over to you, Barghav.
Ashok and panel, thank you. My background is basically, I'm an IBMer for about 27 years. I'm a software engineer with a business educational background. My skills are primarily in Hyperledger Fabric, as well as a bit on CasperLabs. I want to thank you having worked with Ashok, Erich, and rest of the team. Over to you, Ashok.
Thank you so much, Erich, Bhargav, and Rasikh. Erich, as CEO of IPwe, IPwe is blazing a trail by selecting a public protocol for your product. And it's a very interesting product that you're developing at IPwe. Tell us a bit about why a public protocol was suitable for your particular business needs, and what features did IPwe need in the public protocol?
Yeah, so look, we operate exclusively in the enterprise world. So first and foremost, in pretty much everything we do is we need to do something that's acceptable to enterprise. And we work with some of the largest corporations in the world. And we work with corporations around the world, including in China, the US, EU, as well as the Southern Hemisphere. So as we were going through, and we, like probably many of the companies, started out, took a really hard look at Ethereum, and then discovered this thing called gas costs, and understood that the variability in that cost model wouldn't work for us. And so we went out and cast a very broad net with working with IBM, and we did a deep analysis on which protocol we thought would work best globally for our enterprise customers. We came up with 100 requirements, but there were a handful of them that ultimately were really key. And the first one is that it had to be available globally. And when you do that, you get reduced to the number of available chains as a result of the BSN network in China. And then we thought about, whether or not that was, adequate to drive a decision. We ultimately decided that we was. And then after going through and building out the requirements, we ultimately became extremely comfortable that the key for us was not just Casper chain, which we thought had some interesting attributes that would work best for our enterprise companies, but also the ability to work with the CasperLabs team was critical to us. Relatively small company, about 25 people. And so we were not prepared to go it alone. And for us, that was also a critical factor. But again, at the end of the day, the thing that is most important to us is buy-in from the many enterprise customers that we work with, and that was ultimately the key decision maker for us.
Thank you, Erich. Thank you for bringing the requirements and how you went about selecting a public blockchain for your business purpose. Coming over to you, Barghav, we know enterprises are exploring blockchain technology. What is IBM hearing from its customers about blockchain platforms and their requirements?
Ashok and panel, thank you. So I want to take this question and answer in three specific sections. What we are seeing from the field today, what we're looking forward to as we evolve the next generation of these blockchain solutions tomorrow and into future, and what are the core requirements enterprise class applications might need, right? So today we are seeing solutions that are programmable rules for value exchange with replicated shared immutable ledgers. Okay, so clearly we are seeing that. We're also seeing that businesses are actually deriving benefits and value from their existing solutions. One of the things that we have noticed, unlike popular writings, is today's solutions are not really disrupting. Instead, they are actually working as complementary to existing structures, especially the removal of trusted third parties and intermediaries. Those things are actually not happening today. So our solutions are a little bit complementary. The other things we are very clearly looking in today's solutions, the supply chain solutions are really getting intelligent, especially in the domain of track and trace and provenance. When you look at logistics, when you look at food supply chains, pharmaceutical, financial supply chains, and other EDIs and other applications. Now, what exactly are we likely to see towards next generation of these distributed decentralized applications? Clearly, we know now that business leaders are convinced this is a technology that has a future. And if you look at top 5 initiatives across the board from leadership, one of the things they're focusing on is blockchain technology. So there is a future, and there is businesses are convinced. Second thing we learned from this experience and into the future is, I think any solution that leads by technology is not the issue. We need to lead blockchain solutions with the business outcomes, because technology is looking to be easier than forming collaborative consortium memberships and bringing parties together, right? So that's the lesson we are learned, and we are looking forward to, as I think will be reinforced. If you look at some of the production quality blockchains today, TradeLens, Food Trust, Trust Your Supplier, VTrade, for finances and for contracts, Ligon and other things, it's not the technology that was proven challenging. It's bringing all these consortium members together and having a successful network is what we experienced as more difficult, right? So the other big lesson into the future is it's not always the permission private blockchain networks. The future is a mix of private, public, and a consortium based. We clearly see that possibility and opportunity, and that's where the roadmap is. And the reason for that is, again, if you look at the tokenization, which is actually helping and accelerating blockchain adoption, both in the wholesale and the retail side, especially in the context of finance, and also the digital identity and verifiable credentials. So given these two trends, it's no longer viable that the future solutions are only permissioned. That's where CasperLabs and some of the protocols like CasperLabs come into play. It's not just permissioned anymore. The other thing we are noticing versus today's solutions, the future solutions are going to be not sharing the actual data, competitive information on the ledger publicly. Instead, the proofs of the correctness of the data and the validity is what will be on the ledger. We're talking about zero knowledge proofs and making sure the proofs and assertions are on the ledger rather than the data itself. I think that's another lesson we have learned. The other key pieces we believe in, the third parties, the intermediaries will not be eliminated. They will still be needed, especially the wallet vendors and other players like custodians will still be needed. And the other trend we are seeing is you will have to have a network interoperability between various technologies and protocols. So that's another trend we will be getting into. Ashok.
That's an amazing summary, Barghav. Thank you so much. That's quite eye opening for me. When you say that the third parties and intermediaries will still have a role to play, and calling out that the business needs should be driving and not just a tech for tech's sake, driving the future growth. It's interesting also that you bring out public-private network and how they need to kind of work together in future. And that's one of the strengths for Casper is Casper can be deployed as a private network or a public network, which is already live, or could be a hybrid kind of solution. The AWS one-click template that we have for our node deployment, at the click of you can deploy a node, or you can create a private network, or deploy a node that can join a public network. So great to hear it, and reinforce our thinking from your end. Moving over to Rasikh, as CEO of Arcadia, you are heavily involved in DeFi and other layer 1 public protocols. How is Casper technology different from other layer 1s in this ecosystem?
Absolutely, yeah. So Casper's, I guess, main standout difference is flexibility, which is quite interesting considering the larger O1 ecosystem. Casper's, I guess, the way Casper's implemented its contracts makes it so that as things are needed or as new innovations come along, it can be easily added in without having massive and disruptive change across the board. Now, of course, that's contingent on the size of the change, but for the most part, the Casper development team has actually been pretty good about making it pretty backwards compatible. And the gas costs introduced in other chains, Casper is actually very competitive against that. And one of the cool things about Casper is that excluding the gas cost for a second, one of the big things is the block limit. So generally, when you have another I guess standard smart contract blockchain, you have block limits. Basically, how much of a smart contract execution can happen, or how complex of one can happen inside of a single block. Casper's structure is in such a way that that's not as big of an issue, and that allows for much more complex contracts to actually go into play without having to be worried about, hey, can I actually do this in this block? So I think that's one of the bigger points, and it's often overlooked, that it's actually possible to do substantially more complex. Because you can go on Ethereum, and you could theoretically make the gas cost extremely cheap, but that's not going to solve the block limit problem there. Now, there's also some amazing stuff in regards to being able to package smart contracts together and import them in later as Rust packages. Now, of course, Casper uses WASM, so it's possible to do that in other languages as well. And that's pretty awesome. Right now, other chains are actually starting to look into that model as well. And adoption on that side is actually a lot slower because it's coming in later versus right out of the box with functionality for that. So I'd say that's what makes Casper different. Yeah. Sorry for going a little bit fast.
Thank you so much, Rasikh. You always have so much of know-how there. You've been into this space for such a long time. it immediately kind of shows up, because you're talking so much about the details, so much into the details. Thank you so much for throwing the light on this
Absolutely.
specific aspects. I would like to open up to the discussion with this question now, and I'll invite each one of you, and we can talk about it. So, IBM and IPwe and Rasikh, you've been working with CasperLabs for a period of time now. What has your experience been working with CasperLabs? And maybe I can start with Barghav, and then we can go around, and we can probably have a discussion also around that.
Ashok, thank you so much. My experience working with CasperLabs, you, rest of Medha and rest of the team, developers that we work very closely, amazing, absolutely, really amazing. The kind of attention to detail and the hand holding sometimes. I mean, we have a very rich and deep skill base from permission ledgers. Our background is really more into Hyperledger Fabric and related technologies. So it's a shift for our thinking, and it's very exciting to work with Casper Labs from personal point of view. Technology is amazing. The professionalism and the team and their knowledge. I mean, we work as one team right now.
Yeah, that's incredible. We've been working with IBM's core team, and we really work as one team. That's something that really stands out. Erich, we have been working with IPwe and your CTO and your team, um, I think for almost over a year now. What your experience has been?
No, look, it's been excellent, or I wouldn't be here, right? It's as simple as that. We feel like we've grown up with you a little bit, and this was just, it's so hard to remember that just 3 years ago, when you'd go to a large enterprise and start talking to them about blockchain, they would start immediately. The first question would be, oh, you mean Bitcoin? And the curve that we've experienced, just the change in the learning curve between that and today. And for IPwe, it's a little bit different. We're not pitching the CTO, right? Our solution is directed primarily to finance, business development, corporate development, a little bit on the risk management side. So, and we're dealing with a critical asset of the corporation, and it's actually one of the bigger assets on their balance sheet. So we will literally get questions from them that are completely out of left field, and so we have to come back. We don't have 40 developers on our staff, so we have to come back to CasperLabs, and it's amazing that the response that we get from the team is just exceptional. And as I said in response to my first question, it was a big part of our decision to go with Casper, was to know they would have the support of CasperLabs. And I can't imagine being on the journey we've been on without you guys.
Thank you so much for your kind words, Erich. One of the things, in terms of like how the ethos of CasperLabs has evolved, Mrinal Manohar, our CEO, and Medha, CTO, who spoke a little bit earlier, there has been focus on creating an organization which is enterprise focused. So it's not only the core technology, but the team that has been built is such that it comes from years of enterprise experience and years of experience of building enterprise grade software. And that's what we see reflected in the way we interact with clients and our customers and our partners. Rasikh, what are your views? You've been a very strong partner since the very beginning.
Yeah, it's I found the Casper team to be exceedingly patient with us. So since we started working with CasperLabs, it's been a learning process, because our developers have been primarily in other chains, primarily working in Rust in some chains and primarily Solidity. So our experiences were kind of in different areas. So working with us through the debugging process and kind of iterating with us on the different DeFi products we're building on chain has been extremely helpful. So the patience that they've shown with us has been, or I guess you guys have shown with us, which I know that sounds kind of weird, like hearing that, but basically, whenever you're dealing with operating on a new blockchain, this is always a problem. Who do you talk to? How long until they rage quit the chat? Not literally, but figuratively, because there's always some level of complexity with it. And outside of that, the excitement is fun, because there's always a level of burnout after a while, right? In terms of building on a blockchain. But with Casper, that hasn't happened even after, I think at this point, 2 years. So it's very exciting to see. It's and I believe the technical skill we've experienced has been fantastic as well. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the appreciation here. Yeah, one of the things that we realize, particularly when we are set out to build enterprise-grade blockchain and working with enterprises to bring real-world assets onto the chain, we wanted to make sure that we build a services team, a professional services team, which enterprises can actually go to. Realizing that blockchain is not a solution in itself, but is a part of the overall solution, a piece of the jigsaw puzzle that any enterprise is kind of putting together to solve their customer problems, right? Making sure that we are available, we are only a phone call away. I know getting on a call with Barghav on a Sunday and spending 2 hours trying to figure out ERC20 implementation. So that has been exciting, and we come with those ethos and those values. Moving on, blockchain is kind of still in early stages of technology, right? It's not been 100 years, or it's not been 50 years. It's very recent. It's a few decades, maybe just a decade that we are into this technology. How do you see this space evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? Maybe I can start with Erich this time.
Yeah, so my crystal ball's no better than anyone else's. But what I'm seeing is that the questions have shifted on the enterprise side from the sort of what is it, right? That just the curiosity phase to how can it help me, and that's always a great transition when you're working with big companies. So I think that the thing that we'll see over the next few years, whether it'll be 10 years or not, but much like I remember in the late 90s when I was just getting my career started, that we would argue whether we were a .NET, Windows, or Linux shop, right? I see that changing and relatively rapidly. What I think that will happen is that people are going to be inclined to go with the one that works for them. And I think that the strategy that you have with the Casper design, thinking about it from an enterprise perspective, CasperLabs thinking about it from a service perspective, is the right way to go, because at the end of the day, what our enterprise clients care about is what it does and how it makes their life easier. And that's what I see happening, is finally starting to deliver on that promise that we've heard about for the last 10 years, I guess, at least the last 7 years, 8 years. And to me, that's significant to finally see that, yeah, it's really happening. I believed it 3 years ago. I believed it 2 years ago. But today I can say I really see it happening. And I think the companies we work with are seeing it happen as well. And that's super exciting, and expect that only to accelerate.
Thank you. Over to you, Rasikh.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm generally a pessimist, but in this situation, I'll give my optimistic outlook. I think that we're going to see a lot of, in the general, I'd say the crypto space, we're going to see a lot of hardening in terms of getting more mature and getting more put together in a manner that it can stand up to regulatory scrutiny, and kind of putting together the ability to exist unencumbered. And from there, across the board, right now we're seeing a definitely an NFT bubble. I think that'll be probably cooled down into a different form in 5 years, which is similar to how, you know, colored coins advanced into tokens today, and completely different look from 4 or 5 years ago, but still having the same intended goal. As well as with, I think that we're going to see more user-friendly stuff. Right now, if you try pitching blockchain or DeFi or anything along those lines to someone, you're going to have like an empty stare for a bit. But soon we're going to be at a point, and I know the question is 5 to 10 years, but I'd say that's maybe like 2 to 3 years out, actually having user-friendly stuff that, you know, it's 3 or 4 clicks and you've taken out an under-collateralized loan for a large amount of money. Now, under-collateralized loans is and things along those lines in the crypto space is something I'm very excited for. And I think that if it can't be solved in 5 to 10 years, I'm going to be very disappointed with people. But yeah.
Thank you, Rasikh. Over to you, Barghav.
My apologies to Rasikh. Actually, I see a lot of things in life as half full glass, but working in blockchain for last 5+ years, I have to admit we have some more work to do. But I see, as Erich is mentioning, this is the time. There are 3 good things, as I mentioned previously, that give me hope, real hope. One big takeaway is there is a business value, and businesses, early pioneering companies are reaping. So there is a value. Number 2, most leadership or decision makers in enterprises now know that this technology, if they ignore, it's going to be at their peril. It's still not easy for them to understand. So we have some knowledge diffusion to do. We have some advocacy to do, but it's very clear if they ignore, they are at peril. So that's a good news, right? So we can progress and hopefully, take it to the next level. In my view, I think, as I mentioned, some of the trends, yeah, I don't believe all the intermediaries will disappear overnight, but I think right now we are in a tolerate mode with this technology, but the next cycle is going to be really disruptive. That actually is going to do some game changing. So that's my belief. Now, will it happen in 5 years, 10 years? I think it is not still a well understood technology. So we have to educate and advocate, but I think there are good signals. That's my view. Ashok.
Thank you. And Bhargav, I know that you've been attending seminars and kind of helping disseminate the knowledge and helping people understand the technology. So thank you very much for your contributions there as well. The last question. I think we've got 3 minutes left. All Rasikh, Erich, and Bhargav, you have experience working with Casper Network as well as CasperLabs as an organization focused on enterprises. What would your advice be to any enterprises who are planning to build on Casper Network? Maybe I can start with Erich.
Yeah, look, there's in this adoption phase, there's still an educational component. And I think that the key for any enterprise that's heading in this direction or thinks that they're heading in this direction is, talk to the people at CasperLabs. I just can't imagine making a business decision tied to which chain am I going to implement, which one am I going to dedicate significant resources on without doing that. So basically educate yourself and the decision will become apparent.
Thank you. Rasikh?
Absolutely. So one thing that I've learned with some of the enterprise clients we've taken on is there's always the, it's called, I wouldn't say fear of innovation, but it's more along the lines of kind of struggle with that. And it doesn't have to be innovative when you're integrating blockchain technology. So it's always good to keep that in mind whenever looking at different ways to apply it. It can be something that a road that everyone else has already trod. I know that's kind of a boring piece of advice.
So Ashok, from my point of view, my advice to anybody who is thinking about getting onto a protocol and a blockchain solution, just to be open-minded and give a try to CasperLabs. I want to tell you, you will be compelled to get impressed with your choice. I mean, that's my view. I knew nothing until this April, and I'm a big, huge fan of CasperLabs. So it's very compelling and very competitive. So give it a try and prove it to yourself. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Eric, Rasikh, and Barghav. Really appreciate your time coming over here and sharing your experience of building on Casper and working with Casper Labs. Thank you so much. Just as a summary, Casper Labs is a professional services organization building solutions using solutions on Casper network. Casper is a public network, enterprise grade, future-proof public blockchain. We welcome you to come over and read up on Casper and understand the technology. We'd be happy to kind of work with you to build enterprise grade solutions.